I'd like everybody to introduce themselves. I can pronounce every surname except for one, and that's the gentleman on my right. So, Tom, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, sure. So I'm Tom Klotz. I'm working for Agfa since about, forever, I would say, since 22 years. Starting business in R&D and then ending up in a marketing and business development job. And used to run the Empress division and now responsible for looking into new applications, into industrial applications. And that's, I assume, why Sophie asked me to come also to join on this panel.
Did I ask you? Well, I love you anyway.
So, go ahead.
Mr. Wozni.
Yeah, so my name is Mike Wozni. I'm a senior product manager for EFI. I've been there a little bit less than forever, about 13 years. And I'm responsible or work in the inkjet division for EFI. And we've got inkjet printers that start as low as 100,000 euros all the way up to over €1 million.
No marketing, please.
Sorry.
Thank you.
I figured I'd get that out of the way.
Okay. Which colour microphone would you like? Yellow? Goes with your eyes.
Thanks, Sophie. I'm Richard Darling. I work for ZAR. I'm the Director of Sales. And we make print heads. Is that marketing?
No, but you say the bit you said last year, because that was good.
What did I say?
That you're just a component supplier.
Yeah. Enabling technology or component supplier. It's just a device that lets fluids out.
Oh. Oh.
Quite important, though, I think. My name's John Mills. I'm the CEO of Inca. We make industrial printers for point of sale. Industrial is one of those things we're all trying to get into, and I'm be fascinated to hear what these guys have to say as well today.
I'm going to be fascinated as well. So I know it's a boring question, and I'm not going to ask you first. I'm going to ask, I haven't decided yet, but there's still this thing going, what is industrial inkjet, what is industrial print? And we know there's one manufacturer that doesn't really know, and we hope that everybody else does know. So out of the assembled company, because Tom is a newcomer to this crazy setup, I'm going to start with him. What is industrial print?
Well, that's indeed the big question where a lot of talks are about, but if we look at it, industrial print is when you do printing as part of the manufacturing process. That's the most important, and I think that's also what is commonly being looked at as the definition today by a lot of people. So maybe it's easier to clarify with an example. If you want to print, for example, a piece of flooring, and you need 20 square meter with a logo on to put on an exhibition, that, in my opinion, that is wide format printing. That is something that every printer already can do today. If, on the other hand, your intention is to print 5 million square meter of light oak, all the same, then you're printing industrial. Industrial print, in that way, meaning the bigger volumes, the repeat volumes, but really print as part of the manufacturing, not to convey a message, but to add value to something, and that's what it should do. Now, this print, what is print, then is the next question. That can be as well screen print, or it can be flexo, it can be inkjet, and in my opinion, inkjet is only one of the potential technologies to do industrial print. So I would define it, Sophie, as part of manufacturing process, not just to convey a message or a text like wide format would do, and a bit bigger volume than just a few sheets.
You're a good man, that was right. Mike.
I give you the mic.
Mike, the mic. Mike.
Sophie.
Mike.
Sophie.
Mike.
Sophie. So from my perspective, I think Tom's spot on with his assessment. If I think back 15 years ago when the first inkjet printers that were UV based hit the market, people claimed to be doing industrial printing. You know, what they'd end up doing is really more of a store decor, bunch of one-offs. They weren't really part of the manufacturing process. But as the technology, as integrators, has become more reliable, gotten more cost effective, and then we've brought the chemistry part of it, because that's a key part of it, that's a key component to industrial printing, because it's not one size fits all. As the chemistry has come online for it, you're starting to see more of those, you know, millions of square meters type of productivity, type of volumes come online digitally, because they're doing both. It's just not the imaging; it's the chemistry that allows them to be part of the process, where their value is the reduction in cost. It's a time to market benefit or a cost benefit.
Let's ask our component supplier as we go down the row.
Yeah, I agree with both of those things. There is something else that I'm thinking about those, that if it's a UV printer 15 years ago that was actually printing a series of one-offs or short runs, and that's a jobbing kind of exercise, so each one is a graphic print and it's not a product in itself, that's not necessarily industrial, and I agree with that. But then it could go full circle, because as in Tom's example of the millions of square meters of light oak on the floor, I think that's an industrial print process, and it's normally carried out by gravure printing, which is a conventional printing process. That's industrial print, but then it will go combining those two things, so that if every piece of floor is actually different, so that it's a piece, it's like wood, it's like real wood, with that infinite variety element, then every piece is an individual job, but the product category actually has a lot of variety within it. Now, if you take that to something like packaging, where right now you could get a Heinz ketchup and everyone is the same, in the future it may be that every bottle of Heinz ketchup is different. Now, that doesn't take Heinz ketchup out of industrial. It just means that the nature of the product is changing, so that a single product can include infinite variety. And that's where the digital part of industrial digital print comes in. There's one other thing I'd like to add. I don't know if we could go back to this later on, but print suggests that it's actually for graphic purposes or for communication purposes. Industrial inkjet is actually depositing any fluid, and we're all inkjet guys here. It's depositing any fluid, and that can have a visual effect. It can be for visual effect, or it can be for functional effect. And we're probably going on to that later a bit.
We will be going on to that later.
Okay, but we're just, as Mike says, the chemistry moves on, and fluids can do many different things. We're in our components, we're actually interested in creating the opportunity to jet those in measurable quantities, in rigidly quality controlled patterns for the function to have its effect on the substrates. Apart from that, the fluid itself can have any function.
It could be Heinz ketchup, couldn't it?
It could be ketchup. We could print foodstuffs as well by industrial print on the tops of cakes, for example, or
sausages.
biscuits.
Heinz ketchup on cakes? I don't think so.
Yeah, don't you like that?
No, sausages would be better, I think.
I think at this point I'll pass over.
Or a nice piece of fish. John?
It's kind of tough to disagree with any of the descriptions there. I think the only thing I would add to the definition of industrial is, if you actually go around the wide format show, Agristan, DFI, all the printers that we produce for points of sale, wide format, they're all kind of standalone. You buy a machine, you stick it there, you rip an image down, it prints and it goes somewhere, and that's it. Industrial, I think, is where you have it's part of another process. So on Tom's example of the flooring, if it's a melamine type process, then you print and then you have to put it through post-processing. And often industrial means that you have to integrate your print station with some other part of the machine. So either taking the print engine and integrating it into the production line, or modifying the equipment. So I think for us, if we could actually take a standard printer and print and do the job, it might be industrial, but we would probably think of it more as wide format. If we have to modify the machine or put it as part of a different process, then I think that's where we would think industrial. So,
yeah, I mean, going back to Richard's analogy of ketchup, which is this year's theme, is ketchup. Obviously, one of the elements of industrial is we're not talking about standard inks. We're actually talking more about deposition in a lot of cases. And one of the things I've noticed, particularly in the last 12 months, is how formulations are having to be modified now to fit into a certain production process. I mean, would you agree with that? I know who I'm going to ask on this. Mark, my spare panel member.
Okay.
Did that make sense?
Okay.
Come
Yes,
and
of course.
Come and sit on my knee. Oh,
I'm not sitting.
perhaps not.
Okay, of course it makes a lot of sense. I'm glad that you made the remark the chemistry is part of the solution. And what is good news is that people, when they're looking into a new application, they start to think about chemistry from the beginning. They're not just looking to buy a system, no, they're looking to a solution. And that's also the message I think we as companies in this world give. Think it solution-wise. So you need a printer, you need software, you need your process knowledge, you need ink, you need everything at the same time. So do not make a printer and then at the last day worry what ink I'm going to put in. And that's really a change. 5 years ago, they made a printer and then worry about the ink. Now they worry about the ink from the first day. And that's really how it should be.
But this is where the component supplier comes in, isn't it? Richard, with your ketchup.
Yes, it is, yeah. Print heads have to be prepared to be suitable for the chemistry. So whatever chemistry is needed for the industrial process, the print head has to be protected, because a print head is not just something that's a consumable, not in the industrial environment anyway. It's actually something where the longer it lasts, the better the economies of the process. So we're looking for devices that actually last, ideally, the length of time of the equipment. Now, you'll always have accidents along the way, but as a team with these guys, we're looking at systems, support systems, recirculation systems, ink delivery, ink itself as a whole system, and we work together very closely. Now, that's not possible to just to treat all of those things in isolation. So we work with ink companies to make sure that there's a compatibility of materials, and also there's a performance with those materials that delivers what the end process requires. So that's delivering defined, measured drops of a substance onto a substrate with a very accurately controlled position with minimum maintenance. So that's where we come in with our components. But that's a team effort from machine builders through ink companies, and whichever way round you consider it.
Mike's got something he'd like to add.
Well, I think just to reinforce, we mentioned the chemistry. That's a key point. But it was interesting. I was talking to a customer the other day, and it's what's also really become important. It's come online, and it's a big part of the component supplier, a requirement as the component supplier. The customer was telling me that, actually, if you reversed it today, on the graphics part of the business, print comes out, you could tell immediately whether it's a good print or a bad print. If it's a bad print, you fix it. When you're part of a process, when you're part of the manufacturing process, this customer was telling me if there's a problem with what is being jetted, he has 700 square meters of product already printed before he could tell if the first one is bad. So it just reinforces that the chemistry is going to be good, but also because of the way the reliability is today. 15 years ago that couldn't happen. That's just too much product, too much waste involved. So it's amazing the requirement as a result of that's placed on the reliability.
And John wants to say something on this, the tomato ketchup.
Yeah, I think that the ink is absolutely the key to industrial applications. I think if you take any industrial process, people differentiate themselves by their fluids and what they actually produce. And so if you have a fluorine that's particularly tough, and you can't compromise the quality of the fluorine just so you can incorporate inkjet. So if you have a chemistry that works for you, then that chemistry probably has attributes that are unique. If you then say, well, I need to inkjet a fluid, well, inkjet fluids are limited in viscosity, limited in solids content. There's all sorts of constraints of what you can actually inkjet. If you then take those constraints and then the constraints of the requirements of the industrial application, trying to find an inkjettable fluid that does all the things that the industrial partner wants to do is extremely tough. And I think that in the winner in any industrial sector will be who can provide an ink that is the least compromise for end user functionality that inkjets well. And so I think the guys who are going to drive forward are going to be the ink companies. I think the hardware companies like Inca and the head suppliers have to do the best we can to give the print quality, but I think that the unlocking the applications is going to be done by the ink companies.
And Richard wants to add something.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. We think about, I think in the past, inkjet has been very selective on the inks that it can jet. So whether that is the pigment milling or whatever it is, the properties of the fluid have to be tailored to the jetting process in the past. Now more than ever, with the learning of all those years, we can concentrate the chemistry on the primary purpose, which is when it's landed on whatever it's going to. So the more we can concentrate on that, the more useful we can make the process. So the challenge with everything is, and you use the term compromise, there are some compromises that are absolutely necessary, but we've got to minimize that compromise so that the primary purpose is paramount and the jetting process is managed. So that's what we guys work together on. And that needs, there are evolving technologies. So for example, bigger particles in suspension, that are useful for certain products in certain industrial environments.
Tom, do you want to say anything on that? Or hand it down to the AGFA end of the line.
Well, ink is for us definitely one of the more important parts of the business, which we're strongly trying to develop into these new applications. And for us, it's entirely clear that the ink is going to be the breakthrough factor to go into industrial applications. As said, it needs to fit in the real industrial process, because if you take the floor guy again and say you're going to change the whole process now to do your 5 million square meter, that's not going to happen. So you need an ink that, first of all, technically matches the whole process. But further along, the ink also will, as was mentioned already by Richard, having a function from time to time. If you think of conductive inks, well, you need to jet something that is conductive if you want to build conductive lines. If you want to print RFID tags or stuff like that, or antennas, it needs to be conductive. So it's not just anymore a matter of sticking to the substrate and being readable. It has to form the function and it has to fit in the application. And that's why we do a lot of development to match end user process in different segments. And then it's indeed up to the component suppliers to make sure you can get these chemistries that we develop through ahead. Of course, we try to make them to fit through ahead, but sometimes we have a very good chemistry having everything it needs, but there's not yet a head for it. So then there needs to be development on that end, and then there need to be equipment manufacturers to integrate it. And we at AGFA, we also make our own equipment. We have a full wide format range, but from time to time there is really machines being built that are integrated into the manufacturing lines, where some of our partners or some other suppliers will make equipment which is put into a line, because that's what they used to do. They make machines already in a certain segment, and then they add print heads and component to it, and then we are just an ink supplier to these, because we have that technology there. And I think in the future there's openings in the industry, and at least that's what I hope for, a lot of the companies to work together, where each can take his part and bring that all together into the industry. Because if there's one thing interesting about industrial applications, that is that they're quite big in size. They're all in big volume, and each one of them, in my opinion, is bigger than the standard sign and display UV. So there's a lot of room to do things, but I think some cooperation between the major leading companies will help to drive this forward.
But we're seeing some of this cooperation between former screen printing manufacturers, for example, and the inkjet side. It hasn't become an either-or. I mean, if you look at people like Tima and Machine Debris, and the manufacturers that realise that they need the benefits of digital, but some of the old school analog principles still apply, particularly when you're not printing ink. I mean, what are your thoughts on that? You know, do you see more of an integration going on rather than digital replacing screen or digital replacing another analog technology? John's nodding. He's got something to say.
Yeah, I think that every analog print process, manufacturing process, all of these companies are thinking about digital. Even if they don't yet know why they need digital, they're still thinking about it because everybody else is doing it. So we talk to a lot of people who kind of want to understand digital, what it can do for them, and they're in that exploratory phase, and they're probably 10 years away. And there are companies who who need it now because they are losing market share to other technologies and other digital solutions. So I think that there's going to be momentum building over the next 10, 20 years. I think this is a long process. It's not going to happen overnight. There are easier applications to tackle first. Once they've been done and the technology is kind of proven in those environments, I think there'll be an acceleration of adoption. But I think it's a 20-year journey. It's not the next 5 years. I think it's going to take a while.
Yeah, I mean, we've seen a little bit of screen and digital sitting together, obviously, with the Empress, you guys. We see it with Cornet, with the Paradigm, which is a digital print, direct-to-garment attachment that you can put onto a carousel or an oval. I mean, there is an acknowledgement, I think, that you can mix analog and digital.
We see a lot of customers and people who have Empresses that love them. So they're very sad that they can't buy another one. So that kind of combination of digital and screen worked extremely well. I think that there is always going to be analog, because for very, very long production runs, the ink is always going to be cheaper to make for an analog solution, and ink price is going to drive large volume sales. So I think it's as customer demand drives the customization and smaller runs, that's where the kind of digital will come through. But I cannot see the end of analog for high volume production.
Let's pass this to the Agfa. Look at the Agfa people. They're desperate to say something.
We indeed did it in the past. We had a machine Empress which was combining the digital with the analog screen printing, and that worked along very well. And indeed, most people who have it, they're very happy with it. But it was a kind more of a niche. And what is happening? There's also been evolution in the industry. One of the main things they did with the screen at that time was adding, for example, a varnish to the print. Now most printers, we are exactly 10 years post the launch of Empress, all printers have varnishes, so they can do the varnish also together with the digital system. Ink prices came down, and it becomes also more efficient. Now, it's still, I agree fully, it will not go away. The digital printing and the analog will coexist for a very long time. And what we have seen when the move was happening in sign and display, and people were going away from screen towards digital, then at that time you saw that the screen printers like the Temas of this world started to diverse into new applications like industrial, focusing on membrane switches and on special glass printing and all these things. And I think now, so many years later, what is happening is that all the digital print manufacturers are looking into that same move, X year post screen print, and they're doing that. And it will be surprised to see what the next move from the screen printers will be. And then, to answer your question, Sophie, what I see is that a lot of these analog companies start also to develop, instead of a new market with their existing equipment, start also to look to integrate digital printing and inkjet into their own systems. And they start to make systems themselves. I would say some probably more successful than others. But not only from companies you expect it from, but we see companies who in the past used to make equipment for wood handling, who start now to integrate in the wood handling equipment digital. You see companies who were making bottling machines for soda and for beers, who are now starting to integrate printing to print instead of labeling. So all these newcomers in the industry are there, and we will see a lot of movement in this industrial segment with new entrants that were never there before on a FESPA, or that we've never seen in the past.
Mike next. I haven't forgotten you. I couldn't forget you.
So the analog guys are the incumbent, right? They've been doing this for many, many years. They know the market better than the digital guys. They know how to move the materials. They know what the liquids or the fluids need to be made of to be successful as part of that process. So as an industry, it's the easiest path to market with the least amount of barriers is to align with those types of guys to help us get in there, help provide that market knowledge, to give us the backbone or the strategy to be successful in that process, because they are the incumbent. You know, they have all this tribal knowledge. They have the customers. They know what is required. So As digital guys, we know how to deal with bytes and bits and all sorts of electronics, but we don't know necessarily how to handle some of the materials, or we don't necessarily know how to become better part of the processes. So I think it's to move this along, to move the transition along quickly. Aligning with a screen print manufacturer was a great way to get into the market, and it really worked well. And doing it on the industrial side, I think, is the next step for a lot of the digital guys.
Mark, did I snatch the microphone from you? I didn't mean to. It was Richard. He was getting impatient.
I want to add one extra aspect to the discussion, because we have been focusing on being compatible with existing process. So the floor example. That's a good example. But I learned the last 3-4 years that many industries want to do something else with digital. They want to change their workflow. They want to print at the last moment possible. So suddenly they're not interested anymore to use their existing process or to print on an intermediate material, but print, for instance, on the end material. So the bottle, a direct print on a bottle is a good example. Instead of waiting for your design to be printed somewhere off-road on a label, transported to you in too much amount, because you need to be sure that you have enough. You print with them, you glue them. You glue them wrongly on some bottles. You have to throw the bottles away. You have overstock of labels. Instead of doing that, you print in your bottle company direct on the bottle, and you save all those costs, and you print at the last moment when you know you're going to fill it with that many liters, and you print the exact amount at the last moment, especially in Europe, with all the legislation on the languages, where you should have a different label for Slovakia and for Estland and for everybody, 27 different languages. Inkjet is perfect for that, with lowest cost and print at the lowest moment, and you print sequentially all those runs in one run, but actually 12 runs that you make together without stopping, without putting any label in it. And that's a big change.
And that brings reducing waste into the picture as well. Richard.
Yeah, that's a really good point, Mark. You have to think of the economics of this as well, because if you print it's predict and provide. So if you try to plan what your customers are going to want, what we find out is that customers change their minds all the time, and that's increasing. The younger the person, the more their mind changes and the more rapidly. So for somebody who's produced millions of the same product, that's a real revolution in thinking, because they may not be able to produce millions of the same. And that means overruns, it means inventory, it means at every stage you have to produce more variety, and you have to have versatility and flexibility. Digital does that. So if you have those unpredictable situations, whether it's catch-up or whatever it is, to do it later saves money in the process, capital tied up in the process. It saves wastage, and also it can actually help environmentally for the end of life of a product, so that you can recycle what's there. There are fewer dissimilar materials on the same package, for example. But another example, we're thinking about an analog process that's actually integrated together with an inkjet process or a digital process. That can be in the same machine, like an impress, for example, but it can also be in a wider process. So to take it to the flooring example, you could produce more cheaply, more efficiently with a gravure print. But with inkjet, if you can control the imaging, you can actually produce something that is the same as the gravure process. Then you can actually use the ramp up and ramp down, and then spares later on for flooring. The lower volume batches, you can do that by inkjet as a continuous process. And the high volume bit, where it's predictable, you could do as a gravure process. So even in the same factory producing the same product, you can actually divert work digital or to analog, depending on the actual product and the requirements and the phase in the life cycle. What we do know, though, is all products will have shorter life cycles progressively. And that means that digital is probably going to be the technology of choice, or the range of technologies of choice, for many processes that are today analog. And I think the analog guys know that too, so they're looking to harmonize with us all. We can work with them and they can work with us. It's whatever's suitable.
It's interesting what you say about life cycles, though, because a lot of traditionally analog packaging has a very, very short life cycle. It's gone.
And a lot of wastage.
Yeah, and if you look, say, at the medical industry, you know, one-use syringe is printed, it's gone. There are a lot of products where the print life might be, it has to be 10-year life or whatever it is. I mean, you'll know more about this than me, but on medical applications, but the product is gone in 10 seconds. So, you know, obviously digital would benefit there, and as Richard says, on the wastage factor as well. Mike wants to say something. Oh, go on then, Mr. Wozni.
I'm anxious. I'm sorry. I got a real-world example. I was visiting a wallpaper manufacturer recently, and wallpaper is a very small part of our business. It is manufactured via gravure, and I was just listening to the owner and listening to the senior staff, and they were telling me that they have, as compared to 15 years ago, they've got 100 times more product that they produce today than they did 10 years ago. It's not 100 more. It's 100 times more. They actually spend more time doing make ready than they actually do production. So to reinforce what you were saying, what's been said, what their goal is, they want to be able to produce product instead of just in time, at the last moment, right at the consumer type of level. Just because it increases the time to market and reduces the amount of waste that they have.
That's changing over. It was in the automotive industry where cars were provided and people bought what they could have. The famous Ford model was you can have any colour as long as it's black. Moving on from that, it's a push system. You produce something and then people buy it. It's changing to pull. And it's a major change, even though it seems like it's not so major. But when it changes to pull, that opens up a whole range of possibilities. And choice comes into it. And when you give customers a choice, then they want more.
And that brings us on to mass customization, of course, which we haven't really covered yet. But surely that's one of the key things, as much as in industrial, probably more so, than it is in graphics, where it's an obvious thing. I see the mass customization model as being key to successful inkjet integration into the industrial side. Have you got something to say on that one, John?
It's unusual for me to be the kind of pessimistic, negative one, but here we go.
Oh, surely.
I think one of the challenges that we all face is reliability, because if you take the model of having your print at the very last minute, which allows you to do mass customization, all of the things that you would want to do, if that printer does not print at that point, then the company does not produce anything. And in most consumer products and mass production facilities, they're running 24/7, and if you stop, then you're talking about thousands of pounds per hour loss. And at the point that the printer stops working, you stop producing. So reliability of the machines needs to be significantly better than they are today. So, I would imagine that we all have customers out there who spend some certain part of their week not printing because there's a blocked nozzle or there's some other inkjet related issue. You can't have that in industrial applications and in mass customization applications. You have to have a level of uptime. So, if you go and talk to, somebody who's got a Heidelberg press and say, well, what's your uptime? And I'm sure they'll look at you kind of puzzled and say, what do you mean? Does it ever not work? It's that kind of, whereas if you say, well, I've got an inkjet, what's your uptime? And people talk, well, we're 85% or we're 90%, but that means 10% of the time it's not. And so inkjet, I think, fundamentally, in terms of inks and heads and software and integration, all those things, has an awful long way to go on the reliability side to gain the confidence, I think, of these guys. Because I'm sure, P&G, Unilever, Coca-Cola, they're all looking at, late stage customization, but they're not going to do it unless they are 100% confident that machine's going to print at that point.
There's another interesting aspect to this, though, because if you look at the amount of backshoring that's going on at the moment, from mass production in the Far East, in China, wherever, it's now coming back into Europe. and the chances are, because of the quantity that's needed, but it's localized, you're probably going to, I'm being really sticking my neck out here, but there's every chance that that one digital machine is emulated in a local country next door, and that will give you some backup. I think you are being a bit gloomy, but I'll let you sit here till the end of the session. I won't ban you. And Mr. Ketchup wants to say something. Sorry, Richard.
That's an interesting point, because you can always make something reliable by applying a safety factor. So if you had a screen line, an automated screen line in the past, then you could actually run that continuously, with changeovers, of course, which is downtime. But you could run that continuously, and it's very reliable. It's intrinsically reliable as a process. When that started to change to production using inkjet devices, scanning inkjet devices, what people had to do to meet the capacity requirements was put many inkjet devices in. So I've been in places where there have been 20 inkjet devices whirring away, scanning non-stop. If one of those goes down, they only lose 5% of their production at that time. So that's an example of where you actually get extra reliability of the overall process by creating streams of work. And that's the same thing that's happening in direct-to-package printing, where you actually have carousels of many units doing similar things in parallel on a rotary device. So if one goes down, you don't lose your whole production. And that's reality now. So most of our work in the industrial sector, and most of our work is in the industrial sector, is trying to create that 90-something% uptime for 3 shifts, 7 days, that those guys actually demand. And I think we're making really good progress on that.
Well, can I just add as well, the microphone's handed to Tom as well, is that if you look at the logistics, and the logistics of working with digital equipment is probably going to be a lot easier. You might have a screen line, let's use China or India as an example. By the time you've heard that it's gone down, because you've noticed suddenly your quality has slipped, it could be days, if not weeks. Whereas if it's a digital problem that you're running more localized, albeit on a smaller scale, because you don't need that mass production, you need the customization element, you've got a much faster and shorter way of reacting, because the time differences are going to be more cogent. Or do you not agree, John? But Tom wants to say something now, and I'll shut up.
Well, it just adds to this one as well. So in the end, I do believe that it all comes down to the cost of things. So reliability, yes, if you put multiple machines, you have a higher reliability, but you still have cost. Mass customization and doing it locally, reshoring, is a matter of saving on transport costs. So somewhere in the process, everything this digital does is trying to save some cost. In the end, I do not believe they will do mass customization just for the mass customization, or they will print one-offs. I don't think they will print 5 million square meter where every piece of wood looks like real wood, because let's be realistic. If you do 20 square meter of different wood panels, it's probably okay, because you're never going to see that there's 2 times the same flooring panel in your floor. So it all will come down to cost. They will not do digital just for the digital. Digital gives you a lot of benefits, like you can do one-offs, you can do variable data, and some people will use it for that. But if you want a breakthrough in industrial, in my opinion, you have to be cheaper than the present process. And let's take one simple example, and it also comes down to the waste you were talking about. If you look at ceramic tiles, which is a market that has been booming to digital, it's completely switched over, and there's people in the room who know 10 times more about it than me. But one of the breakthrough factors was that you could use a thinner tile because you had non-impact printing. So instead of using screen and breaking all the time the tiles, which were at that time 8 or 9 millimeter, they make tiles of 6 millimeter. Fun for you because it's thinner to lay down. You have to shop less of your doors. But the major thing is, it is cheaper. And the cost saving is not in the digital printing, is not in the reshoring. It's something totally unexpected, like, hey, we can have thinner tiles. And that's why it breaks through, and that's why it's so massive. So yes, people will use digital to do industrial print for some short runners, for some medium run, some mass customization, reshoring, wastage, everything will happen. But in the end, to convert an industry, you have to bring the cost down below what it is. And that's part of our task. we need cheaper inks, cheaper machines, and definitely cheaper heads. We need all to be, no? We need everything to come down, to come to a level where you can actually replace with digital and reach the cost point of present technology. And once you reach that point, even a bit more, then people will start to think reshoring, mass customization, and all the rest.
Well, just adding to that,
We need
before
cheaper inks,
Richard...
but not print heads.
No, children.
Actually, I think what I heard
No.
was that the print heads are the reason why we're not
Can you
doing
turn
mass
him off,
adoption of
please?
digital.
But the bit, you kind of touched on it, but delivery becomes cheaper, particularly in ceramics. The fact that if you can get 12 into a box where you formerly could only get 4, your shipping logistics are very much lower too. So that needs to be factored in. So you were arguing about... Go on.
No, I was just trying to add a little humor to the
Go on,
to the
let's have
panel.
some humour.
No, but I mean,
I
I
can
think
always get them
I
to
think we-
turn you off.
Yeah, we did touch on this a little bit earlier. I think one of the things that's enabled us as integrators to be more successful, be more mainstream, is just the overall reliability and cost of the print heads. I mean, that was a constraint 15 years ago. To get to the reliability, you had to have twice the number of nozzles. To have twice the number of nozzles, your costs went up accordingly. Today, you know, the printhead manufacturers have become much more reliable, a lot more cost effective, and as a result, you know, we're starting to see that adoption, the mass adoption into these analog industries, because we are able to offer solutions that are more cost effective, lower the end user cost, reduce waste. I mean, all the other benefits of digital. But it really got started when the printhead manufacturers enabled us as integrators to get there.
I bet Richard wants to say something now. No. Mark, you're very quiet. You got anything to add to that?
Yeah. Again, I think this is the same discussion that we are talking about, changing the industry by changing the workflow. So it's not only about printing at the last moment, but it's thinking out of the box and see if you can make the same product in a different manner, so that reliability issue might not be an issue actually. You have when you print on closure caps, they have a camera inspection, and the bad ones are rejected immediately during the process. They never end up in the next step. So when your cost of printing is quite low per piece, it doesn't matter that you lose 1% because they're printed on the wrong place or something. It doesn't matter. It's not the full cost that you pay, because you avoid the cost in the total flow next in your logistics. So logistics is indeed important. And it's one of the discussion is, if you do mass customization, do you want to make different SKUs, or do you want to have one SKU which comprises different images? That's a big question. Because how are you going to handle this one? Is your flow manageable to keep this? And you have the Heinekens that print overnight your image on 6 bottles and you pay 3 times more to that. Yes, that model exists. But the real model that your consumer in the store can buy mass customization is not this concept. Then your SKU needs to be managed completely in your workflow in the factory where you make the product, including the print.
We're going to be running out of time fairly soon. Did you have something to add on that one, John? Go on, because then I'm going to give you your last question.
Yeah, I guess it depends on the application, because if you talk about mass customization in food packaging, you know, you take a Coca-Cola line, they print 2,200 cans a minute. So there's a linear speed of over 2 meters a second. You have to do that a single pass in an environment that's dusty, water, and all the rest of it. So the idea of printing on a bottle, if I asked the panel how long would it take to print one bottle digitally in line, it's going to take you a long time relative to 2,200 passing per minute. So mass customization is great, but in order to fit that into production lines that are producing thousands per minute, then you down into single pass. Any guy who's doing single pass then has all sorts of other challenges to face. So when you look at tile printing and those things, there are things that allow tile printing to be done relatively easily. Printing on flooring and things where there are easy images to print. So if you walk around the show, you'll see that every one of us is actually printing relatively easy images on the thing. If we all printed our test images, you'd really be able to tell the difference between printers. So when you get into industrial applications, you've really got to look at what the print quality is, what the speed is, because the speed is the thing that's really tough to do. Because speed means single pass. Single pass means there's one chance that a nozzle has to work in order to get that. If its nozzle's not there, and it's that, when I talk about reliability, that's the thing, is that if you allow yourself the luxury of going very slowly or multiple passes, it's okay. Single pass, high speed, yeah, that's where it gets tough.
I saw you looking at Richard then.
These guys are, I mean, the thing is that head technology has moved on phenomenally over the last 10 years. If you look at the stuff that we can do now, you walk around the show now, it's almost impossible to tell the difference between any of the printers. I walk around now trying to pick holes in these guys' printers, and it's tough to do it because they all look great, you know, and they all look great because the heads are great, the inks are great.
Just come and ask me, I'll tell you. Yeah, I'll let you know. So I think we've probably got time for one more question, and it's going to be a secret because I don't want anybody else to know, but just one at a time, because obviously you're all in manufacture of a kind, even if you're just a component supplier. But what would you like to see happen next in industrial to promote the inkjet side? Or what do you plan to do next? Which I know is a difficult one for you, John, because you're in a slightly different segment, shall we say it?
We get people approaching us regularly, so there are no shortage of opportunities to do that. So there are multiple people. We have more opportunities to go after than we have time to do it. So I don't think any of us are sitting there, we can't find people who really want to do this. Finding the ink, educating the customer to realise that, you know, there are process changes that could be beneficial, but maybe different. They have to think differently about it. There's a period of education of the customer. We qualify somebody now. If somebody comes to talk to us first, before they've actually sorted out their ink, we tend to dismiss them because they haven't really understood the problem. If they've come along with an ink and an ink partner and say, we need you to build a machine for us, then we take them seriously. So that's one of the things that we tend to do in terms of qualifying. So I think there is enough momentum in there. What we need now is we need to see, other than ceramics, which has been a huge success, we need more successes. What we need is real projects to deliver, and people will see that and say, yeah, inkjet can do that in that sector, and it will grow from there. I think there will be a slow evolution over time, but it will happen. It's just going to take a bit of time.
Do you find it actually more difficult finding potential customers for this sector because it's not obvious they could come from absolutely anywhere?
We tend to find customers via the ink companies. Yeah. So the ink companies are looking to find a mechanism by which they can put their ink onto the substrate, and they do that via the machine. And so ink companies tend, you know, not to necessarily be equipment suppliers. So, you know, Agfa are in a good position because they have equipment, they have inks and do that. So but there's a lot of ink companies out there who don't have ink equipment, and we get them. You know, they come to us and say, we've got this customer, they want to do this. Can we build a machine around that? And that's the kind of prospect we get. But again, when you start talking to the customer about real world speeds and what that actually means and what they're having to do in terms of putting redundancy in there, then there's a bit of education to go through. But there's no shortage of people wanting to do it, I think.
I'm going to pass this down to the other those manufacturers, the twins at the end.
I tend to agree in very big lines. So what I think needs to happen in this industry and to enter into the industrial is definitely some further cooperations between a lot of the bigger players, be it indeed the component suppliers, head ink and equipment manufacturers all together. And I don't think that there's any one of us who really seriously thinks, but correct me if I'm wrong, that they can build every industrial machine. You will need partnerships, and you will need, in all these different segments, partnerships. You will need partnerships also to enter into the market, because it's usually markets we don't know about. We have technology, and together we can make even better technology, and we can enter in very big markets. but we don't know exactly these markets. So you will need the help as well from some pioneering end users and customers who are willing to also step into this digital story. And indeed, a good extra success story like we had in ceramics, a few more of these will help the industry and will help other industries to look at it. On the question, is it easy to find customers? No. They just approach you and they come out of the middle of nowhere where you never heard of. Sometimes that they say, by the way, I'm doing this or this industrial thing and that's my business and I want to print on it. And then sometimes you go like, huh? And then you think like, that can never be any volume. And then these guys start to talk and then it's, oh, but we do only 300,000 pieces a week. But that's because we're relatively small. There's bigger people in our segments. Who the hell is using all this? And then, where is this stuff going? Apparently there's a lot of people on the planet. There's about 6, 7 billion, 8 billion, 9 billion, I'm losing count.
Are they all here this week?
Yeah. And they're all here. And this industrial thing is driven by the population growth and by the GDP. If there's more people, there will be more industrial products needed. You will, and it also is not going to go to digital, to real digital. I mean, you will not walk on an iPad, at least not in the next coming years. You will still need a floor. And then more people needs floor. So it's really growing, and I think there's room for cooperations, and customers are out there, and they are looking for us. And if somebody has a need for an ink, or if somebody has a need for a machine or a hat, talk to the suppliers, and then you can do it. All together we can make it happen. Sophie?
You're selling yourself, Tom. Mark, did you want to add to that, or has he said it all?
No, I would add one thing. What is also a big change is that we are more and more approached by the brand owners. And more brand owners want to print themselves. So in the old days, they had all companies working for them, converting, if you want to call it like that. Now they want to have full control. And they want to print the panel display of a washing machine or whatever. They want to print themselves. So they are your partner. And they are the demanding party. But they know the application extremely well.
And Mike?
Yeah, I think all the opinions that we've conveyed so far are spot on. I mean, there is plenty of opportunity out there. There's no shortage of it. I wish we could hire hundreds and hundreds of more people so we had enough resources to go after those opportunities. And the partnerships are the ones that are going to get us there. I mean, they're the incumbents. They're going to help us get there. They have the tribal knowledge, and they're going to make our road of implementing digital into industrial easier. What I see is, a lot of these are old-time, long-time businesses. People have done the same thing years after years after years, and that's what the process they're used to. So change is hard for them. They're not used to it. This is a dramatic change in how they run their business, how they do their business. So you really need more of those early adopters, those guys that are willing to step out. And once they get, installed, that they're up and running and things are going well, then it becomes organic. People will follow. The market will follow them. You just need those first early adopters that are willing to take the risk, because digital is so new. It's so different than what they're used to today. They're used to doing the same thing, same thing day in, day out.
Richard, and then I've just got something very quick to say.
Okay. I think the question was, what do we want to get this moving on? We've had a ceramics revolution. I think it took us all by surprise, but I think Tom identified that quite correctly. If you hit the economic trigger, if you create an economic benefit, and that's not just on the process, the narrow part of the process itself, that's on the whole process. So it's the capital tied up in it, it's the risks, it's the capital expenditure, it's the work in progress, it's all of those elements. So if you look at the whole thing, the whole process in an industrial environment, does it hit an economic trigger? Well, we know as a component supplier, and I'll just say that, it's also an enabling technology. So we have our part to play here. We're working all the time on creating things that will enable the whole group of us to hit those economic triggers. So when we know, because we're at the early stages in these things, these projects, we've been working with some companies for 8 or 9 years, and their programs haven't come to the surface yet. We know others are 5, 6 years. We know what's going on. We know that all of these people who can revolutionize their supply chains are actually doing it now. The work's in progress. So what we need to move this on, to create the good news, is for somebody, is all within non-disclosure agreements, we need some of these guys to actually come clean on what they're up to, because all this stuff is actually happening. It's just that we're not allowed to say anything about it. So what we need is for people to open up a bit more as to what they're working on.
It's interesting because just adding a little bit just at the end to do with all this, which has actually only occurred to me as the conversation has gone on, I must get half a dozen emails a week saying, oh, we hear that you understand about the digital market. We've got a product, we don't know how to market, as in mark the product, not market the product. And I say, okay, so if you'd like to set up a call, you know, this is my charge structure. And they said, but it will only take 10 minutes. And I said, well, I'm really sorry, but, you know, the knowledge has taken me a lot longer than 10 minutes, and my contacts in the industry have taken, 30, 35 years. So I'm not giving it away. But then the other side of me said, that's wrong, because this is what you people need. So, you know, I'm between a rock and a hard place, but I do have to earn a living. I just think it's a bit mean that they expect me to provide them a free conduit to the manufacturers of the various elements and the integrators, and that's not me getting the violin out, but I bet I'm not the only one that's saying that. On that note, on that jolly note, I think we're out of time, or on time, and I'd really like to thank my extended panel that bursting off the sides of the stage. I'd like to thank John Mills for his second appearance with me this week. Richard Darling, who likes to sit next to me. And Mike Wozni likes to sit next to me, I think. And Tom and Mark, it's your first time in one of these experiences, and I hope you'll come and do another one next year. And I thank you very much indeed, because I think we've had a very interesting, balanced or unbalanced, but it's been an interesting discussion, and thank you very much, everyone.